it's Reagan, and today I'm filming one of my most favorite videos to film every year. It's a little controversial, and that is the worst books I read this year, or for this year, the worst books of 2017. Now, particularly this year was a really great reading year for me. I read so many fantastic series that have become lifetime favorites, so because of that, it was actually really hard to narrow down the books to talk about that were my least favorite comparatively to my favorites. That being said, a lot of the books I'm going to reference are by no means bad, but they were the worst compared to the best books I read. They kind of fell middle of the road, they didn't really blow me away, and because of that, they made this list. But anyway, without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive right in. So the first book I'm going to talk about was probably honestly the most disappointing book for me this year because I was anticipating reading it so much. And that's because the person who wrote this is actually one of my favorite authors. I'm obsessed with one of his other series, and that is The Way of Shadows by Brett Weeks. As you guys know, I love the Black Prism series by Brett Weeks, but this particular series sounded amazing. It's all about like assassins. It's about a character in a fantasy world that goes to an assassin school. It's supposed to be dark and eerie and creepy and bloody and everything I love in fantasy books. But honestly, I found it to be boring. I didn't like the characters I was supposed to like, and it was just overall so disappointing. I just didn't like it at all. I honestly just was so disappointed by it. It was alright, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like the worst book I ever read, but with my expectations being so high and compared to his other series, The Black Prism, which has such an immense world with so many incredible plot points and diverse characters doing different things, a lot of characters in The Black Prism I don't like. Even some of the main characters that I'm supposed to like, I don't really like. But that series has so many other characters that I love to read from with such an amazing plot and magic system that I love it. This series didn't really have any of that for me, and overall just left me feeling meh, disappointed. The next book I'm going to talk about might be a bit of a surprise, and that is The Copper Gauntlet by Holly Black and Cassandra Clare. I made this list because the first novel, The Iron Trial, I loved, and I couldn't wait after reading that book to marathon the entire series, read them all, and then I picked up the sequel, and it underwhelmed me. I honestly was kind of disappointed with how this book went, kind of how it expanded the world slash didn't expand the world, and I would say in a lot of ways prevented me from hurrying on and reading the next few books of this series, which I hear pick up much more than the second book. I've read in quite a few places that the second book disappointed some people as well. And again, it's not that this book was anything I hated, it just wasn't nearly as good as the first one. It kind of left the world flat, it didn't really explain things that needed to be explained, it was a little convenient, and ultimately disappointed me because of that. It was especially disappointing because I feel like this series has such potential and was also written by two, again, of my favorite authors, that I feel like it kind of missed the mark where it could have just like excelled. The next book I'm going to talk about was my least favorite contemporary of 2017. Again, this might be a bit of surprise because I do like this book, but compared to the other contemporary books I read, this was definitely the one that I liked the least, and you can kind of see that in my rating. I gave it kind of like a flat 3 stars, and that is Karela by Ashley Poston. Now, this book is a lot of fun. It has a lot of elements I enjoy. Geeky girl who loves fandoms, Cinderella retelling with going to like a con, and has a lot of really fun elements, and I did enjoy it. But compared to some of the contemporary books I read this year, like When Diplomat Rishi or Always and Forever Lardine, this book isn't nearly to the same level as those books to me. So while I found this book fun, it was a little predictable. The plot line was a little exactly where you expected it to go, which made it a really easy read, but compared again to the other books I read this year, was my least favorite. Next up is Vampire Addiction. I have a really deep guilty pleasure for dark paranormal romances, normally involving vampires of some kind. I still love reading those every once in a while. I find them to be a lot of fun, which is why I picked up this book, and I expected to have like a good, fun time with, you know, romantic characters and like a little bit of ridiculous plot, but action and adventure and romance and all the things that make a fun paranormal read. This book had some of those elements, but ultimately the plot felt really flat for me and had some really unique ideas, but it didn't really follow through on explaining any of them, and ultimately I felt the plot to feel a little jilted because of it. I also didn't particularly like our main character, and I found that her story arc and her character arc again felt a little convenient and didn't make a lot of sense. Ultimately, this book was good. I think if you like this genre, totally give it a try. But for me, it didn't really give me the punch I wanted from when I want to read like fun paranormal reads. So because of this, it made my list. And the last book I'm going to talk about was a reread that I ended up DNFing, which is why I don't think I've mentioned it on my channel yet. But I picked up this book because I've had such fantastic luck this year rereading fantasy series I've read in the past. So I was super excited to pick this up because I loved it like 3 years ago when I read it, and I never finished the series. So I picked it up and it was Born Wicked. And it was kind of disappointing because I did not like it nearly as much the second time through as the first time through. I ended up not finishing it because I was like, this just makes me too sad because I loved this series so much. I think it definitely has a huge part to do with the fact that since I've read this story, I've read a lot of fantastic historical fantasy novels, and while this plot is really cool, it follows a group of sisters in Salem, Massachusetts who have magical powers and they have to hide it. It was not as good as I remembered it, and it was a little conventional, a little predictable. In a lot of ways, I actually wish I didn't even try to reread this series so I could keep the positive memories in my head, but I did, and because of that, I was confronted with the fact it wasn't as good as I remember it being, which was such a bummer, but regardless, it made the list. Alrighty guys, those were the worst books I read this year in 2017. Please let me know down below some books that really disappointed you this year or just kind of paled in comparison to some of the fantastic books you read. I love talking about things like this. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I will see you guys soon with another one soon. Goodbye!